Trigger Spoons, Trigger Spoon Magnums, Trigger Spoon Pros, Trigger Spoon Juniors, Speed Spoons, Speed Spoon Pros. Looking for spoons for your trout fishing adventure? Think FHS Spoons. You can check them out at fishhuntshoot.com. Let this breeze kind of push me back. There are fish everywhere underneath me right now. Oh, there it is. I don't know what it is. Probably a bass. Oh. Today, I want to talk about trout fishing, and I want to talk about a technique you probably haven't tried. Talk about aggressive trout jigging. Now, some guys, not many, some guys jig for trout and they use crappie jigs, they use drop shot rigs and stuff like that, and they fish very subtly and they shake the rod tip and stuff like that. We'll cover that approach, coming up here on the channel. But what I want to talk about today is aggressive jigging. The kind of jigging that we do in saltwater, it translates to freshwater, and it translates to trout fishing and to bass fishing too, as an aside. It can be highly effective. It's something I'm just starting to play with. I've done a great deal of jigging in saltwater. I'm starting to apply those techniques, those approaches, that kind of philosophy to jigging for trout and landlocked kings, and it's starting to pay dividends. Now, you saw in the beginning of this video, I jigged up, a rainbow trout, a little holdover, up at Rollins Lake. I had found those fish feeding on pond smelt. I found a nice concentration of bait and fish on a particular hump. I was killing the fish while I was trolling my speed spoons, so I slowed down. I stopped, actually. I started jigging with a orange and chrome speed spoon just like this, and I got almost an immediate hookup. So the approach is very effective, but there's some things to know both about technique and the situation. Let's start off talking about tackle. We'll talk a little bit about technique and situations, and then we'll kind of round it out with a discussion of some of the lures that you might use. I've been using one of my signature series spinning rods for jigging, and it does work, but it's not perfect. Let me show you how I got it rigged up, and I'll tell you why it's not perfect, but it is effective. I've got the reel spooled up with 10-pound braided line, and on top of that, I have a 20-foot 10-pound fluorocarbon top shot. Okay, that whole rig is very low stretch. It works just fine. I bring that down. Well, let me tell you what I'm using this rod for. I'm using this rod because it offers me maximum versatility out of the kayak. I'm using it for trolling. I'm using it for bait fishing, and I'm also using it for jigging. Okay, so in this case, I've got my main line coming down. You've seen this rig before, a bead, a snap swivel. I've got about 40 inches a leader, a cross lock snap tipped with, in this case, a speed spoon. So I can cast this out and troll it, out in the kayak. If I see some favorable marks or a favorable spot, I can stop trolling. I can grab this rod very quickly. I can do a little bit of jigging, see what happens, go back to trolling, and be on my way, because I am very much in the experimental phases of this kind of jigging. So I'm playing with it. So I need a rod. I don't want to tie up space in the boat for a dedicated jigging rod that I might use for 5 minutes throughout the day, or I might not use it all. So, space is at a premium in the kayak. So I've been getting by with this. The reason it's not perfect is the action of the rod. It's a little soft in the tip. Now, for some applications, Lake Shasta, I used to do a great deal of jigging off of the docks at Shasta. I could get by with a 1/4 ounce Castmaster. That works great with this, okay? And I can effectively jig with a 1/2 ounce lure like the speed spoon with this rod. The problem is you're not gonna be jigging off of a floating dock most of the time. You're gonna be moving, okay? And whenever you're moving, you've got to think about line control. Even when I'm in my kayak, I might be drifting along at 1/2 mile an hour. the closer to vertical you can keep your line when you're jigging, the better off you are. And when you're in a boat, in a kayak, in a float tube, the ability to stay vertical is partly boat control and it's partly the weight of your lure. And about the minimum weight that I can use out of my kayak is a 1/2 ounce. And a lot of times I want to use something even heavier. So the bottom line is, if I were going out to jig all day long or jig a lot, I would want a faster action rod, and I really wouldn't want a spinning rod. I would want a conventional reel. I've actually just spooled one up in my garage. I have one of my Abu Garcia 5500 level wind LC reels, line counter reels. I've got that spooled up with 15-pound braid, and I'm going to put it on a semi-fast action conventional rod, probably a black bass rod, to be honest with you. And that's going to be my dedicated jigging rod. Something a little bit faster action in this spinning rod, something that can handle a little bit more weight. And also something that's going to tell me how deep I am. Because a lot of times at places like Folsom or Shasta, you're going to be working bait that isn't orienting to structure that's in open water. Maybe you need your jig down 40 feet deep over 100 feet of water. Well, that's going to be hard to do with a spinning rod. I'm going to have to strip off line and estimate where I'm at. Whereas, with a line counter reel, I'm going to be able to drop it down there and have a pretty good idea where I'm at. You're going to have to consider the line angle a little bit, but if you've got 40 feet of braid out and your line's going straight down, your lure is, guess what, 40 feet deep. So I think that's just going to be more efficient as I get more and more, serious about aggressively jigging for trout and landlocked kings. Now, before we talk about the lures, let's talk about the basic technique. And I actually was taught a great deal about jigging up in Alaska by Captain Steve Smith. And he taught me a very important trick that's going to help you catch more fish, whether you're in saltwater or freshwater. And here's the deal. So you drop your lure down and you're going to, lift the lure up, jerk the lure up, and you're going to let it drop. Lift it up, let it drop. Lift it up, let it drop. And pretty soon you're going to lift it up. Oh, fish on, I got one. Okay, it's very important when you lift the lure up and you drop it that you don't put a bunch of slack in the line, but you give a little bit of slack. Okay, you got to drop the tip fast enough to create a little slack in the line, because that little bit of slack, it increases the action of the lure as it falls, and that's when most of your bites occur. Now, sometimes you'll see the line twitch if you're really good at jigging, or you'll see the line stop. That's a bite. Most of the time, you're not going to feel or notice anything. You're going to drop the lure and you're going to come back up and you're going to be solid to a fish. Well, that fish isn't grabbing the lure on the way up. You're just setting the hook into him. He's already got it in his mouth, okay? So by putting that little bit of slack in the line, you're increasing the action on the lure, thereby increasing the amount of strikes you get. And honestly, you're going to miss a tremendous amount of strikes when you're jigging, and most of them you're not even going to know they occurred. But by increasing the amount of strikes, you're going to, thereby increase the amount of hookups. So remember, play with it a little bit, but you want to be able to impart just a little bit of slack as that lure falls. So that's a very important tip, and that's going to catch you a whole bunch more fish over the course of a season, or especially over the course of your jigging career. So just keep that in mind. Let's talk about lures. As I mentioned, I like the 1/2 ounce speed spoon. It works well. One of the reasons I like this spoon so much, I control it fast, I can cast and retrieve it off the bank, and I can vertical jig with it. And anybody that watches the channel knows I like versatility. But let's take a look at a couple more serious, jigging weapons here that would definitely need to be worked on a heavier rod. First one, this is a pretty common lure. This is your P-line laser minnow in the 1 ounce and 2 ounce sizes. As you can see, it's a pretty simple jig. It looks like a pond smelt, it looks like an anchovy, it looks like a bait fish, has a nice prominent eye, has a nice profile on the side, very thin, from that direction. It's tipped with a high quality treble hook. This is a killer on landlocked kings at places like Elminor. Used to be great up at Shasta when they had more kings in there. That fishery seems to be bouncing back a bit. But the P-line laser minnow, just a standard offering, has a beautiful finish too. Color, finish, not that important when you're jigging, but who doesn't like a a lure with a great finish. Just adds to your confidence level, and confidence, means a lot. So if you're confident in the lure, if you like the way it looks, you're going to fish it better, longer. It's just gonna enhance your presentation that much if you got a lure on there that you like the looks of it. So now this is a lure right here. I'm not even gonna show it to you yet. This is a lure that very few fishermen or fish have seen on the West Coast. It is a Rapala. Doesn't that thing look crazy? It's a Rapala ice fishing jig. Now, ice fishermen, they do a lot of jigging. I mean, let's face it, there's not much you can do through a hole in the ice. You can soak bait, you can hang something and mooch it down there, or you can jig. That's pretty much it. You can't cast and retrieve. You can't throw a swim bait through a hole in the ice. So those guys do a lot of jigging, and this is a very popular lure throughout the upper Midwest and Canada. It is your Rapala jigging minnow. Now let's take a close look at it. It has hooks everywhere. A hook on the back, hook on the nose, treble hook on the belly. Your line attaches right there. The body of this lure is made out of lead. This one weighs 1.5 ounces, and it has that interesting plastic tail right there. Now, when I first started using these, I would drop it down there and I'd impart a little action on it, but I was just trying to keep it in that kind of orientation, looking like a minnow swimming through the water. I was like, well, it's got to stay horizontal and look like a minnow. And I had zero luck on them. And really starting to question whether they would work out here on the West Coast. And then I came on a walleye fishing video with L. Linder. And he was on a reef somewhere in the upper Midwest. He found a concentration of walleye. And man, he would drop that Rapala lure down there, hit bottom, and then he would rip it off the bottom really hard and then drop it, and rip it and drop it, rip it and drop it. And he started putting a whooping on these walleye. And as an aside, a lot of walleye techniques, whether it's trolling with planer boards and lead core or jigging or whatever, a lot of that stuff, it crosses over. If you see a walleye guy doing something on YouTube, I can almost guarantee you that at some point, at some place here in California, you're going to be able to catch trout using the same exact technique. So just keep that in mind. But my takeaway from that was I was being way too gentle with this jig. So I was out of Collins Lake last year. I got way more aggressive. I found some marks right at the mouth of the creek. I found some marks there. I found some threadfin shad there, and I started working one of these. It was a chartreuse and white one, very aggressively. I immediately caught a couple spotted bass. I caught a rainbow trout. Then I hung the bottom. I lost my lure, went back to trolling, and on with the day. But my takeaway is aggressively working these Rapala minnows works well. That plastic tail, it gives it unique action. It gives it kind of a spiral drop. It's very cool. So I am going to be fishing these lures a lot more this summer, situationally, and I expect them to produce very well. Definitely want to put some, if you're jigging, you definitely want to put some fish scent on your lure, some Procure, whether it's a spoon, the laser minnow, one of these Rapala lures, you definitely want to put some fish scent on it. Now, let's talk about situation in closing. You can basically couple 3 different situations where jigging really excels. One is if you can find fish and bait on structure. That's your number one most awesome opportunity right there. That's what I had at Rollins. I had a hump. I had pond smelt. I had hard marks around the pond smelt. The fish were feeding. I dropped that speed spoon down there. I started working it and fish on. Bam, that easy. You can kind of blind jig structure, work the structure, and you will catch the occasional trout, king, and bass. But I really prefer to see marks. The third situation is open water jigging, and that's probably the most challenging because you got to know the depth. The line counter will help you with that, but it's kind of like that situation I described. You might be at Folsom, you might be at Shasta, you might be at Don Pedro, you might see a spot of bait down at 35 feet, over 150 feet of water. You need to get your jig just above that bait ball and start working it. If you can pinpoint that, and it's hard to pinpoint moving bait in open water that's suspended, but if you can get your lure down at that depth quickly enough, you can put a whooping on those fish. And these techniques cross over. You can use these same approaches in saltwater. You can jig for stripers. You can jig for all kinds of stuff. You just need to build confidence in the approach, confidence in the technique, and you're going to need to experiment, a good deal to dial it in. But in the right situations at the right times, you can stack up, hookups very, very quickly. So that's about all I got to say. I am a rookie when it comes to jigging for trout, but it seems like I learn something new every time I try it, and I'm gonna be experimenting with it a lot this year. If you don't like, trolling all the time, but you don't have the patience to sit there and soak bait, give jigging a try. It's a kick in the pants. It is the frontier. It is the cutting edge of West Coast trout and landlocked kingfishing. Make no mistake about it. There's very few guys doing it. There's very few guys that understand it. And I don't think there's anybody who's really got it dialed in. I know there's guys that are better at it than me, but I don't think there is a quote unquote trout jigging guru at this point. So everybody's opinion matters. Go out there, give it a try, get yourself some Rapala jigging, jigging lures, ice fishing lures. Maybe grab some of the P-line laser minnows and get after them. If you're looking for lures, I'm signing off now. If you're looking for lures, if you'd like some speed spoons, they're extremely versatile for fast trolling, casting, and jigging. As I said, click on over to the Fish Hunt Shoot Production store. We have a full line of tackle over there. We have rods and reels, spoons, and more. Everything you see me fishing on the channel pretty much is available in that store. It's all stuff that I believe in, stuff that I stand behind, and stuff that I offer to you at a fair price. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. I sincerely want to thank you guys for all the support. We're over 3 million views now. I never thought that would happen. And none of this stuff happens without you folks, the viewers, our fishing friends out there in California and beyond that are supporting the channel, supporting our store, and watching all my stupid media as I stand here in my backyard and talk fishing with you guys. Anyway, everybody stay safe. Wash your hands. I know we can't all wait to, get out on the water. We're all excited. We want to get past these, these shutdowns, all this social distancing and stuff like that. But right now, we're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to be smart. And we will all meet up on the water on the backside. And it's going to be fish on, because guess what? There's a lot of fish out there that haven't seen fishing tackle in a while. And that means aggressively feeding fish that are dialed into patterns. We're going to discover those patterns and we're going to put a whooping on them. Anyway, I'm Cal Kellogg. You have a great day. I am signing off. I will see you again right here tomorrow on YouTube. Thanks a lot, guys. Woo! Wow, that was a strike and a half.